remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. I remember when I lost my mind.
Hello YouTube, Ben here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And today's topic is massive fish sell-off. I listed some fish on Craigslist and somebody responded, and they were at my house within about a half hour, and after responding to the ad, and ended up taking a large number of my fish, 10 of them actually, and I'll go over with you what I sold, and that's part of the risk of buying juvies is that once they start to take on size and you want to have an all-male tank, what do I do with the extra fish? Okay, I had a few extra females, I had even a few extra subdominant males that probably will become beautiful and dominant in their new home. So let's take a look at the tank and what's left, and I'll give you an update on some of the changes that were discussed in some earlier videos, okay? So thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get started. So first, let's do an update on some topics I mentioned in an earlier video. The Hogue 2 that you can see here, the Hogue 2, has finally started to show some algae taking hold, and that's pretty exciting. I've also added both outlets of the fluval are now hooked up. I brought in a 2-into-1 air. A little air adapter. You can see it right here. So this is taking both outlets from the fluval and then running it into the Hogue 1, creating much more air going through the, which will help provide oxygen, nutrients, and movement to help develop the algae. So I am starting to get an algae bloom in there, which is awesome. The purpose of the algae scrub, of course, is to remove from the water those things that contribute to the growth of algae, and contain it within the scrubber. That's why it's called an algae scrubber. That algae will help produce oxygen and will remove nitrates. So it's very good stuff. And if you're so inclined, you can also harvest that algae and use it to feed fish who would like that kind of thing. So another item mentioned in an earlier video is the placement of the power heads and wave makers. And I mentioned in the earlier video how I had added some smaller ones to strategic locations in the tank. And as you can see, this tank is not being vacuumed. And the substrate is looking real good. I used to have to touch up this tank usually almost every night, and or at least every other night, just to keep it up to standard. So that is no longer the case. Now let's get to the fish. So I believe one of the VC10s, one that I think is going to end up being a male, was provided to the buyer. Also 2 of the red empresses, leaving me with what I felt were the two more impressive red empresses. I kept those 2. They've colored down quite a bit since they've come to this tank, because of course they're in a new environment and they're very subdominant, but I suspect they're going to color up again. So 2 red empresses, a male and a female. A male VC10. I kept this VC10 here only because I like the unusual color, and I kept another VC10 that you can see back there. This might be a female. We'll see. I certainly don't want any breeding going on, but at any rate, I also let go of 2, the Dimiochromis, the Strigatus. I kept the most impressive male, which is hanging out back there by the rock. And I let go of the other 2. One of the 2, I think, is a subdominant male that is going to end up being a beautiful fish. I also got rid of a small Sulphurhead, I believe, was a female. And I also got rid of a VC10, one that I think is actually going to be a male. It was a very, very nice little VC10. All in all, the person picked up 10 fish. And I'll tell you, it was quite an adventure to catch 10 cichlids in a very short period of time with a buyer standing right next to you, watching you splash around and kick a stool back and forth, trying to stay high enough, using 2 nets, trying to catch the fish. Someone said I should have time-lapse recorded it because it was pretty darn funny, and it was. I ended up pretty soaked. Fortunately, I had put some towels down so the floor didn't get too sopping wet. I also ended up including in that sale a couple of the Buccochromis spectabilis. One of them, I believe, was a male, and I kept the larger male, which is still in the 60 gallon. As soon as he puts on a little more size, he'll be coming over here. And all in all, 10 fish were sold, and the person offered me $100. I said, okay, you can have them, come get them. So things have thinned out. Now, someone told me that dolphins do better in groups. The way this one's harassing the other one, I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but we'll see how that pans out as they settle out. Fish do go through phases sometimes where they become a little nippy, and sometimes that has to do with establishing dominance and breeding, and then they settle down. I have noticed that once the haps establish the pecking order, they pretty much get along fine. Whereas the peacocks, for example, this otter point right here, hiding behind the rock, that otter point continues to harass the other peacocks. Never quite satisfied, even though he has been getting attacked back. You'll also notice that I brought over the smaller Taiwan reef. Didn't have the heart to sell that guy. He's just too spectacular, even though I have a much larger, probably pushing 7 inches, adult male. But the adult male just seems to ignore the other one, probably because he's so small. He doesn't consider him a threat. I don't have any females in here to fight over. So we'll see how that pans out. So that's the update on the tank, and that's the latest and the greatest. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's appreciated. As you know, come visit on Facebook. I'll list a link to the Facebook group page, ben.o.cichlid, below, and also follow on Instagram at ben.o.cichlid. Okay, I'll list that down below with a link. And thank you so much for your support of the channel. The channel has gone through some recent leaps and bounds. I really appreciate that. And I've added, you probably noticed, a logo that will appear over here on this side of the screen. If you tap on that, you can go ahead and subscribe, and be sure to hit that little bell at the bottom. That way you'll be sure not to miss anything, okay? You folks are greatly appreciated. I'm not saying that just to say it. I really do appreciate that you folks take some of your private time and listen to me talk about fish. Thank you so much, folks. All right? That's all for now. Bye-bye.